Hey everyone, welcome back to the Design Den. I'm Ryan, and this is a second episode of the World War II first-person shooter game. There's absolutely no time to waste, and I am super excited, so let's get right into it. All right, so we're gonna kick this thing off with a little bit of pre-production work. And I know, the boring part. The part in the LD community that you either love or you hate. If you do it too much, you're ruining
the extra creative process
by trying to predict something before you even know if it's good. And if you do it too little, you're gonna screw it up and you have no idea what you're working on and prototyping at first.
So get out of here, it's all about those intensity graphs.
Ooh, no. Listen, it really depends on the situation. Every team is gonna have a different approach to the creative process when it comes to making their game. What I'm going to try to do is objectively give you as much information as possible and let you decide what works best for you. So what we're gonna look at today is what I would consider to be the first documentation that any level designer should create when they're about to start a project at a studio or even on their own personal projects. Now this is a type of documentation that you would normally see an LD create for themselves, for their, to kind of get that mental throw up of whatever it is in their mind out onto something, or they might use it to pitch the idea to the rest of the team. That's why it's super important to ask yourself at this point, who are you making this for? Is it for you to keep track of your own thoughts? Or is it to pitch to the rest of the team? Or maybe you have a review with the leads and directors and you really need to have it super polished. I wanted to mention that because it's really important to know how much time you're gonna put into this thing, because you really don't wanna overdo it at this point. All right, enough talking. Let's take a look and break it down. So a few summers ago, I visited Berlin, and one of the places I took a tour of was Tempelhof Airport. The architecture and history of this place really grabbed my attention, and I've wanted to build a level out of it ever since, so that's what I'm gonna do. So here's some quick context on the building's history during the war, so you're not completely lost when we run through the pitch. So in the 1940s, the building was one of the 20 largest buildings in the world, with almost 900 rooms covering 300 square meters at 1.2 kilometers long. At the time, Hitler wanted Berlin to be the capital of the world, so that was the basis for a lot of its design. When you're there, you can really feel that evil monumentality style of architecture that was often used by the Nazis. It's really weird, but also interesting if you're into World War II history. During most of the war, the building wasn't even used like a typical military-controlled airport. It was used for a lot of different things, but mainly to build Stukas, which are the German dive bombers. Although the German forces had anti-air to protect the building, the Allied forces strategically avoided damaging the structure because they knew it would be a valuable asset during the post-war efforts. Okay, so here's where it leads into the level narrative a bit. So the airport was taken over by the Soviets during the Battle of Berlin, which they led. But there were American forces just outside of the city that did not partake in the battle. So at the time, the American forces were recently coming out of the Battle of the Bulge, which took a big toll on their numbers. And Eisenhower apparently had some apprehensions toward risking more American soldiers when the war was so close to being won. Okay, so we have these two US soldiers, right? They've been separated from their unit and they find themselves lost in Berlin. Their goal is to reach Tempelhof Airport to somehow use the communications in hopes to safely regroup with the US Army. Alright, so let's just get on with it and take a look at the pitch and see what I've got going on. Alright, so off the bat we've got the title page, I've got a working title for the level, and an overview image of the airport. Doesn't need to be anything crazy, super simple here. So I really like to start the pitches right off with the narrative. I feel like it really helps set the tone for the presentation and the level, and hopefully put people in the right headspace to get what I'm putting out there. You can also edit a video compilation or rip-o-matic to help sell the level. Whatever it is, anytime you can let imagery do the talking in terms of that tone and the general vibe that you're going for, the better. Okay, so that leads us right up to the gameplay overview. This is where you want to describe the high-level player experience and list out any hooks or unique gameplay for the level. You can also add a flowchart or a super basic top-down if that helps get the point across. Essentially, whatever it is that you think makes your level worth making or that you're most excited about, this is where it goes. So, to describe my approach to figuring out the gameplay to everyone watching, I'm going for more of a non-linear type of design where players can choose their own path and experience something different on each, and then the events culminate at the end when players finally reach Tempelhof and things will recenter and focus more like a standard linear first-person shooter level at that point. I think it's a cool angle because this is where the narrative translates into gameplay. For me, as a single-player designer, that marriage between the gameplay and what the human experience in that scenario would actually be is super important and what really bridges the gap between narrative and design. Okay, so now the presentation pretty much turns into a series of random ideas for different types of gameplay verbs and unique beats, or moments they're sometimes called.
What I do is I have individual overviews on each slide to give people a tiny bit more context and list out how I would imagine the mechanic working within the level. I didn't get technical with the descriptions here because it's still just a high-level idea at this point, but you can totally point out things if you find them necessary. So for this one, I thought it would be really cool to kind of have a sniper assist moment. So one friendly soldier gets pinned down by a group of German troops, so the player has to kind of bounce around to different positions on the map to take better shots or get a better angle on the enemies and take them out before they locate the friendly. So here's another one that I really like that's a little different and I don't know, kind of out there, but it goes along with the narrative that I'm going for, so why not? So what if the friendly soldier that you're with kind of has a breakdown and they're shell-shocked and scared and they refuse to fight and they kind of just curl up in the corner and these soldiers are kind of coming in and the music is intense and it's kind of like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And the player has to defend the area all by themselves, and in between waves they kind of have to maybe go back to the friendly and interact and kind of console them and kind of help them and talk to them. It's a little different and probably really difficult to pull off, so we'll see what happens, but I wanted to throw it out there. So I always like those stealth sections in games where you're super outnumbered, you're trying to escape, you can totally engage, but you probably don't want to engage. The Last of Us 1 did it really well in this section called Hide and Seek, so I just called this Hide and Seek. But the idea is that you and your friendly have to hide from patrolling German troops, and you can take them out if you want to, and you're moving building to building to kind of avoid them. And you can hide in interiors or under rubble behind cars. And if the enemies become aware of your position, maybe you can kind of run away or try to find cover or take them out. So then we have a vehicle sabotage gameplay verb, which is something reusable throughout the level. It's something in the player's toolbox, a simple interact that disables enemy vehicles. We can have an objective for this. Maybe players can take control of MGs or anti-air. Maybe not taking them out and taking them out changes the difficulty of encounters. And then the cherry on top is to have these be more of a mimetic interaction for different types of vehicles or equipment so that you're not just pressing and holding down the same button to succeed. All right, so that's the end of the pitch presentation. Before we end, let's go over some quick and simple points. When you're coming up with ideas, it doesn't matter where you start. I say let your curiosity guide you. I know that seems silly and vague, but there's no need to overformulize this part of the process. Don't overplan. You may have noticed I started talking up Tempelhof Airport as this really cool location, and then the pitch didn't really include much about it. That's because I didn't tie myself down to a beat-by-beat or an arbitrary flowchart with a list of objectives and a super basic story that's centered around the airport. Instead, it was just a catalyst for my imagination to run wild and come up with a unique narrative and plenty of ideas to start prototyping. Now when it comes to the presentation part of things, less is more. Remember to limit the amount of text and rambling that you do during the presentation. People's attention spans are short and you want to leave them wanting more. And pictures, and videos, and more pictures. When pitching ideas, I find that if you don't over-explain things and have more images, people will use their imagination to fill in the gaps and find their own reasons to get excited about it. Otherwise, they'll grasp onto some minute detail that you thought was essential to add, and now they can't see past it and their mind is made up. Also, keep in mind that in a studio environment, you're only given a day or a few to churn out at least one of these types of pitches, so keep it simple. And lastly, here's a look at how I translated the narrative themes into gameplay. I essentially just tried to think of moments or mechanics that back up the situation I've developed here. The goal is to potentially evoke matching emotions on a player and pull them into these soldiers' shoes. To me, that's how to create extremely immersive situations that the best single-player games are known for. Don't take this as the end-all way to do things. This is just my personal way and how I've decided to work on this project. This is only the first step towards making this level. There's a lot more to do.
And I think that just about wraps it up. That was a lot, I know. All right, so I think I'm pretty much done for now with the documentation part. For now, just for now. But I feel like I'm totally comfortable working with what I have and getting started. But before I reach that point where I can start prototyping some of the mechanics that I was talking about, I need to set up some of the basics in Unreal. Things like the character movement, basic weapons, some UI elements, all that stuff. And I need to start fleshing out the metrics, or build standards they're sometimes called. So I'm gonna get started on setting all that stuff up right now, and we'll talk about it in the next episode. Now, if you've watched the video up until this point and you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit the subscribe. Lightly tap it, don't smash it. Don't hit it, just lightly tap the subscribe button so you get the notifications. Follow us on Twitter, I'll put the links below. For the Discord too, join the Discord, it's awesome. There's so many great things going on in the Discord. There's amazing conversations with developers and people who are networking and giving feedback. It's really awesome. And I'll see you right back here next time in the Design Den.